I'm from Appalachia, a coal miner's daughter. For hundreds of years, people settled here to find freedom. They persevered by relying on themselves and their family to survive.
Very nice.
But my home has changed. We've lost our self-reliance. Appalachia has been left to fail. I'm Emerald, a proud Appalachian, and I want to thrive, not just survive. So I'm going to Washington, D.C. and team up with famed economist Dr. Richard Rahn, and together we will find those people around the globe who are thriving against all odds. First stop, Santiago, Chile. Founded in 1541, this now booming metropolis has served as the country's capital since colonial times. Thanks to Santiago's steadily growing economy, the city is home to a beautiful rising skyline, a thriving theater scene, urban development, dozens of shopping centers, and a restaurant scene to rival any metropolitan city around the globe. It's also home to the tallest building in Latin America, and it's inspiring because in just a relatively short amount of time, it's shedding its status as a poor country and has emerged as a developed country. With a California vibe, vibrant streets, and beautiful architecture, it's hard to imagine a less thriving Chile. Yet just 40 years ago, Santiago was a very different place. Almost half of all Chileans lived below the poverty line. Inflation was at 150%. The streets were not booming with business, and free trade was, well, nearly non-existent. The word free was a foreign word in general. Chile experienced increasing political turmoil in the late 1960s and early 1970s, resulting in the rise to power of Marxist Salvador Allende, whose government was greatly influenced by Castro's Cuba. In 1973, Allende's government was overthrown in a coup d'etat. For the next 16 years, Chile was governed by a military dictatorship headed up by General Augusto Pinochet. Full democracy was restored in 1990. Economic reforms were begun in the early 1980s, and the country went from one of the least economically free to one of the most economically free. What enabled Chile to evolve into such a drastically different country? How did this place pull itself up out of the mire of poverty to reach prosperity? That's what I wanted to find out. My journey began with one man who had a vision, a dream of a better Chile. That man is Jose Piñera, former Minister of Labor, Social Security, and Mines. Piñera instituted a novel idea of a privatized pension plan system that would provide Chile with the capital it needed to grow into a now developed country and to inspire a different way of living for its people.
It was very important, Emerald, at the very beginning in 1975 and the later years, to do a set of coherent and quite radical free market reforms. We began with opening the economy to free trade, lowering and eliminating import tariffs, import quotas, regulation, allowing Chile to both import the best products from all over the world, at the same time export in order to get the dollars to buy the imports. So that has created a huge export industry in Chile and huge new sector that we never dreamed. And salmon and fruits and software. And that created the incentives for the Chilean companies to increase their productivity because they had to compete to survive.
More economic freedom means more freedom for everyone to dream. Carolina Echenique was inspired to start her unique brand of snacks, Tika Chips, right in her garage.
I had a dream. I dreamt that all these chips were falling from the sky. So I picked them during the dream and I looked at them and I realized that there were potatoes and different vegetables, all colored. And I woke up that morning and I look at my husband. I just look at him straight to his eyes and I say, okay, I'm gonna start all over. I'm gonna do this healthy snack called whatever that is going to be with different vegetables from Chile, all natural and colored, and I don't know, I'm gonna start this adventure.
Needless to say, Carolina outgrew her garage and has had to greatly expand her original team of just 3 employees.
I just thought that it was going to be a cool product, really good, and I don't know, everyone was going to need it or have it close to their homes in little stores. But now we are in more than 3,000 points of sale in Chile, and we're expanding all over. We're exporting to 12 different countries. This allowed us to employ a lot of people all over the world, and this is just free trade.
I have to say, I'm liking the taste of free trade.
We just sold our first container to New York, so we're going to start in like retail stores, small stores, gourmet stores, delicatessen stores in New York. I'm going to find out how to expand in the US. I hope that everyone likes
I need to
that.
figure out how to get them to North Carolina because
Okay.
that's where I'm at, and I know they'd be huge. So, and I need to have access to them. Not only was the dream of starting a successful business unlikely 40 years ago in Chile, but prior to the 1980s, there was also little hope for the average Chilean to live out their golden years with security. Thanks to political turmoil and a flawed system, Chile's pay-as-you-go Social Security was bankrupt by the late 1970s. But Jose Piñera believed that freedom also means the freedom to plan for your future on your own terms, so that's where he began with reforms.
And then is when I came with the plan and I said, what is wrong about, you see, the traditional tax and expense Social Security is that you destroy the link between contributions to the system and benefits from the system. Because different laws define the rate of contribution and different laws, subject to a lot of pressure, define the benefits. Why don't we create a system of personal retirement accounts where you save for old age so that your benefits are strictly related to your effort of work and saving? So it's a system based on responsibility, on saving, on effort, on liberty. And the system has allowed Chile, together with a lot of other reforms, to multiply our income per capita from $5,000 to $23,000 a year. And that is the threshold of being a developed country. Poverty in Chile has come down from 50% of the population that it was when we were beginning to 7.8% of the population. So what I said, the mission of our free market revolution was not to create a country without rich people, because freedom produces some rich people, but a country without poor people. If we are able to show the experience of countries where freedom has worked, we can do a great of good around the world, because not only Chile has been this successful, but after 10, 15 years of this experience, I began to spread the Chilean experience around first Latin America. I went to Peru, I remember, and now Peru is booming. And then we went to Colombia, the same thing, and Colombia is booming. And then to Mexico. So all the Pacific countries, for example, have a system of personal retirement accounts modeled after Chile.
Now, the average Chilean retires with more than the average American. The average annual rate of return has exceeded 9% over the last 30 years for Chilean workers, much greater than the 1 to 2% rate of return U.S. Social Security pays. Let's put that in perspective. Where I can expect roughly $18,000 in today's dollars from Social Security at age 62, a Chilean colleague of my same age could retire with an annual pension of $55,000. That's more than triple what my yearly Social Security income might be. And my Chilean colleague can choose if and when they want to retire.
A system like this also creates capital markets, create a pool of savings that can fuel economic growth. You can build all these beautiful buildings in the center of Santiago, in Sanhattan as we call it. And Sanhattan is the daughter of the private pension system, because all Sanhattan is built with the savings of the workers.
So I headed over to Sanhattan. to check out these buildings that were constructed using the capital from the pension plan, and to talk to one of the visionaries inspired by Piñera himself to transform this section of Santiago into a 21st century city. Francisco, thank you. So nice to meet you. Francisco Roncaray, CEO and founder of Territorial Real Estate Group, remembers growing up in a Chile where poverty persisted and survival wasn't easy.
Chile was completely devastated. So I was 12, and my child was about making lines to get bread, making lines at supermarket to get oil. My mother used to send me as if you were in your state. I mean, we didn't have provisions to feed the family. My vision of freedom was very limited because basically I wasn't free. I didn't have food. It's just as simple as that.
But the word freedom became more than a distant idea when Piñera and his colleagues began to make real changes in the 1980s.
Most of them realized that prosperity to Chile would come out of freedom, economic freedom. I strongly believe that economic freedom, it is the base of prosperity. It's impossible to build a state without freedom, because freedom is what activates innovation. Freedom is what gives you that extra effort that you need to get a business going.
After attending school in the States and working abroad, Roncaray returned to Chile in 1997 and founded Territorial Real Estate Group. Francisco has played a crucial role in the development of Midtown Santiago, now known as the El Golf District, including having constructed Santiago's first mixed-use building, the beautiful Territoria 3000, in 2012.
When I was in New York, I lived in Midtown, and I understood the city completely different. So downtown, it was sort of like business, very district-oriented, and Midtown was more sort of young, hype, service-oriented, freedom of buildings, very flamboyant architecture. And I said, that's amazing the way this works, right? So when I came back to Chile, I spoke to Jose, and I said, Jose, you know what? Chile will have its Midtown. So we did the first building on Isidora Goyenechea, which is a boulevard nearby here. And I'm very proud to say that, we created Midtown Santiago.
This is Midtown Santiago, part of the savings account of Chile.
We built this tower. This tower had been sold to German pension funds. That means that the Germans in Munich believe that it's actually more sound to have a rent in Chile, in pesos, for their future welfare, social security, than in Germany.
And then Chileans buy German Volkswagens and Mercedes cars. Well, it's a circle of free trade. And Roncaray's vision continues to grow.
Look, across the street we have a project, it's $400 million. It's the largest project in Chile, probably in South America. It's $400 million worth of money going to people. Because when you build, that money goes directly to people.
Francisco wanted us to see what a dream looks like when it becomes reality, so he took us over to Territoria 3000, Latin America's first world-class mixed-use building. Francisco gave me the VIP tour of the building, which hosts premium office space, lifestyle and high-end retail space, as well as the W Santiago Hotel. We dined in one of the building's many celebrated restaurants, and the dining part might have been my favorite. Yeah. The economic boom did more than just create jobs for Chileans and grow the cityscape of Santiago. It had another interesting effect that I wanted to see firsthand: beachfront living for the average Chilean. So after lunch, it was off to Costa Brava to check out beautiful condos on the coast. 30 years ago, the Strip was nothing but rock and sand. A lot sure has changed here with freer economic policies. Pedro Larroque, entrepreneur and member of Chile's middle class, invited me to take in the view from his oceanfront condo in the beautiful Viña del Mar.
This is the really wonder of free market, of the free market revolution. We middle class people who can afford to buy their dreams of this incredible view to the ocean. You might agree with me that this is a $1 million view. I was born in 1975. I am, as you might say, a son of the free market revolution. Those bunch of economists in 1975, where the epic economic to freedom began, they had a dream, and we are the beneficiaries.
It may look a lot like Malibu, but it sure doesn't cost like Malibu. Chile's coast has seen the takeoff that California's coast had a half a century ago, but even the middle class gets to enjoy this beautiful oceanfront view. And it is beautiful, isn't it? The wealth to create these beautiful condos came from new, productive, and innovative businesses in Chile. For example, Aqua Chile, which does high-tech fish farming. Victor Pucci, CEO of Aqua Chile, has built one of the largest high-tech fish farming businesses in the world. 40 years ago, it wouldn't have been possible to build this kind of business in Chile.
There was a huge economic revolution in Chile in order to eliminate all the protection on the industry, to open the country to the world in terms of forcing for more efficiency. Many of the protection from the local producers were eliminated, and sectors like salmon then raised because we saw the world as the market.
Now Aqua Chile exports salmon, tilapia, and all kinds of other tasty fish to 34 countries all over the world, making it affordable for people to have nutrient-rich fish year-round. But this model entrepreneur had humble beginnings. Patagonia, Victor's home region, is a sparsely populated region located at the southern end of Chile, which borders Argentina. It's a land of dazzling explosions of islands, glaciers, icebergs, and mountains. This region is about as far away as you can get from Santiago in both climate and culture. Its beautiful but harsh terrain makes it difficult to build roads, not to mention the formidable ice skates. Isolation and landscape made economic prosperity in Patagonia seem, well, improbable. But the success of Pucci's Aqua Chile has meant positive change for the region.
In Patagonia, I grew up there.
Oh, you did? So
Yes.
that was home for you.
Yeah, and when we were sick, we went to a hospital in Argentina in the 60s, 70s.
Really?
Yes, I mean Argentina was much closer, and what the salmon business did was to create communication every day, many times a day, because we were moving and we were moving people and moving raw material
Technology.
and production and harvest and everything.
Yeah.
So it was the social impact of the growth of this industry. It was really amazing. Also happened, many well-educated professionals from Santiago, from Valparaiso, went to work into the industry, and they brought a different view, they integrate with the local people. So it has been a really good success.
Often, people around the world don't understand how an entrepreneurial capitalist like Victor helps all of mankind.
The main starting point was the decision of Chile, from economic point of view, to open the economy to the world, to produce what we are efficient on, and to buy from the rest of the world what we are relatively inefficient, which is the basic trade reason. And that give us open, in our case, the world to us.
And if Tasty Tika chips wasn't enough to sell me on the importance of free trade, the Chilean wine sealed the deal. With its unique geography and a climate described as being midway between California and France, Chile is a perfect location for agriculture in general. However, the Mediterranean climate and the natural pest barriers of the Atacama Desert to the north and the ice fields of Patagonia to the south make it perfect for growing grapes and making wine.
The wine came to Chile with the Spaniards. When they came, they brought the vines for, I guess, mass wine, and everybody drank wine at that time. But the wine, in a way, became a serious business in when most of the traditional companies were founded in second half of the 19th century.
Thank goodness the doors opened up to allow the rest of the world to enjoy Chile's crisp Sauvignon Blanc and its flexible Cabernet Sauvignon that boasts many different attributes.
In the 1980s, most of the companies started looking outside Chile. The economy was not that big to justify so many companies. Most of them, Santa Carolina is one among them, and we may be an example of how to grow outside, but we started growing in many different countries outside Chile, mainly Europe at the time, the US, Canada. In the 1980s, export business was 0 or 5% of the company at the most, and now, at least for us, more than 90% of our volume is devoted to export. Our market now changed from being Chile to the world.
Not only does the wine business rely on its exports, but it also relies on its imports.
One of the main things that we import is barrels, which is a very important thing especially in premium wines, barrel aging.
Smaller Chilean vineyards also have their place in the global market. According to Ricardo Peña of Viña Quebrada de Macul, competition encourages creativity in producing smaller labels.
We are competing against wineries all around the world. And there is a lot of competition. And that's why we need to focus ourselves in producing something different, something that identify itself with the land, with Chile, rather than trying to produce an international wine, which will be difficult to differentiate from other wines from the world.
Thank goodness for free trade. It would be a shame for the rest of the world to be missing out on this. Although wine, salmon, and other Chilean products have become big players in the global market in more recent years, there's been one Chilean resource that has always been a big export: copper. Although the country has always exported a lot of copper, it didn't make Chile rich. However, as a miner's daughter, I couldn't leave Chile without checking out one of the country's many copper mines. So I headed out to the Atacama Desert in the northern region of the country to the city of Calama, where Chuquicamata Mines is located. While this land lacks in water, it makes up for in minerals, especially copper. Though the importance of copper declined somewhat in the 1970s and 80s, this mineral still makes up 1/3 of the country's total exports. Due to mineral right reform during the 1980s, most copper and other minerals now come from private mines. Former President Allende had nationalized the copper mines, which have been Chile's main export. After Allende fell, successive governments kept Codelco, the copper company that runs the most important state mine deposits in government ownership. But beginning in the late 1980s, private copper companies were allowed. And now these private companies produce about 2/3 of Chile's copper, and the state company only about 1/3. And as a coal miner's daughter, I found it interesting to see a similar industry in another country and compare it to my home and way of life. I took in the town and the mining site here in Calama, and I thought about the people and the place and how they relied on the industry, and I was reminded of home. After visiting the mining site, I wanted to make sure that I took in some of the more touristy attractions that the desert had to offer. So I jumped in my red rental pickup and hit the desert road. As luck would have it, I was out in the world's driest desert during an exceptionally rare rainstorm. We've been traveling east from Calama to San Pedro, and along the way, there has just been some amazingly beautiful landscapes. The Atacama Desert is just gorgeous. In fact, right now I'm standing in front of a world-famous landmark known as Valle de la Luna, or Moon Valley. It's just stunning, and we couldn't have picked a more perfect time to be here because, well, it's electric, if you can't tell from my hair. There's a storm right behind us, adding to the beauty of the desert and bringing out its gorgeous colors. I was struck at just how lovely the Atacama Desert was. Many of the Chileans I had encountered insisted that visiting the desert was a must, and they were right. The landscape and colors of this region were stunning. Sites like Valle de la Luna, or Moon Valley if you will, and the oasis town San Pedro de Atacama attract thousands of tourists every year. Very different from the hustle and bustle of city life in Santiago, this little town has a unique Chilean flavor all its own, which it definitely capitalizes on in tourism. My trip to the northern region of Chile made me realize how geographically diverse this country is, and how Chile's geography within itself has been an obstacle to overcome for economic prosperity. A long, narrow country, about twice the size of California, has an average width of only about 110 miles, with a very arid desert in the north and rough mountainous terrain in the south. Chile is a land of extreme natural events, volcanic eruptions, violent earthquakes, and tsunamis. In fact, Chile has been struck by 28 major earthquakes, registering more than 6.9 on the Richter scale during the 20th century. 2010 saw one of the strongest of these at 8.8 on the Richter scale. Sadly, an estimated 780 people were killed. However, that is small compared to the over 230,000 lives lost in an earthquake of lesser magnitude in Haiti that also occurred in 2010. In October 2015, another large 8.4 earthquake hit Chile, but fewer than 20 people were killed. Economic freedom provided the resources to build more secure structures, as seen in the all-glass Territoria 3000 building I visited earlier in my trip, that is designed and built to withstand such events. We've seen what works in Chile. Now the question remains, will Chile be able to maintain the policies and economic environment that allowed it to become a developed country with more prosperity for its citizens? Or will this country follow the lead of so many other countries that have forgotten where they came from? Finally, it was time for me to head back to Santiago to wrap up my time here in Chile. As I prepared to return home, Dr. Ron and I talked about all I had learned here in Chile and why Chile is so successful over a nice outdoor lunch in the Chilean sunshine.
Chile used to be a relatively poor Latin American country. Argentina had a much higher per capita income. Venezuela had a much higher per capita income. Now Chile, by following the economic freedom course and economic liberty, now has a much higher per capita income than Argentina or Venezuela, who basically have gone to a statist, almost socialist type regimes. The key reasons Chile has succeeded are, first of all, the rule of law with honest judges, strong protection of private property, basically free markets, largely free trade, relatively low tax rates, fairly low levels of government spending, reasonable regulations, and a stable currency.
Pretty simple.
Yes.
It is widely recognized an improbable successful business idea strokes the imagination of others to also be more innovative. The same is also true of countries. At the time that it was formed, the United States was the only constitutional democratic republic. The success of the United States caused other countries to move away from monarchies and various forms of dictatorship. By the dawn of the 21st century, the majority of countries had become some form of democratic republics. Neighboring countries have of course watched Chile's success. Before I left Santiago, I wanted to understand more about how Chile's success has potentially impacted the rest of Latin America. So I spoke with Ian Vasquez, Director for the Center for Global Liberty and Prosperity.
In Chile, the reformers really set out to create a fully functioning free market economy that would lead to a free society. They explicitly did so, and I think that that's the first country that I know of that had that as an explicit goal. And it was that model of a free society based on a free market that the rest of Latin America saw at the beginning of the 1990s when they started their own economic reforms. And that had a big influence. Well, I think that Peru is really the country that came closest to following in Chile's steps. After Chile, it was the country that introduced the most far-reaching reforms in the most comprehensive and coherent way in the shortest period of time, and achieved great results because of that. And it's not surprising why it was interested in doing so.
Prior to making constructive policy changes, Peru had been in a dire economic situation. By 1990, Peru had gone backward by 30 years in per capita income due to socialist economic policies. By following in Chile's footsteps, Peru too has become an improbable success.
Depth of reform goes a long way, and it has in Peru. It has completely transformed the economy and the country. It has a very stable political system, even though there's all sorts of intrigues. Nobody really doubts that the country's going to go back. But in terms of its economy, it's been completely transformed. There are now Peruvian multinational corporations in a number of different fields. Nobody would have ever guessed that, even 10 years ago. Nobody would have guessed that. There are non-traditional exports that Peru is involved in that nobody would have assumed would have been possible a short while ago. A lot of the rich people in Peru right now come from middle class or actually very modest and even impoverished beginnings because they had this freedom. Entire parts of the country have been transformed. The coast of Peru is mostly a desert. Entire parts of the country are green now because there's been an agricultural revolution that has happened. This has spread throughout most of the country so that the interior, the rural areas, which have always been the poorest areas, and which have always been the ones that have not really benefited from higher economic growth when it has come because of a lack of a complete liberalization in the country, in the last 15 years have seen really high growth rates, much higher than along the coast and in Lima, in the capital city, so that the poverty rate has plummeted like no time in history. There's been a transformation of Peruvian society that has never happened in the history of Peru, and it is not at all an exaggeration to say that this is the best moment in Peruvian history.
However, as Dr. Ron had mentioned to me, another of Chile's closest neighbors did not follow the country's example of economic freedom, opting to follow the lead of another Latin American country instead.
The country that has really been the model of bad economic policies since the late 90s and the last 15 or so years has really been Venezuela. It's been the populist model. Argentina is a sort of disciple in that regard of Venezuela, as are a few other so-called populist countries in the region.
In the 4 decades before World War I, Argentina had the highest annual growth rate in the world, at about 6%, making it one of the 10 richest countries on a per capita basis. But that's no longer the case. Now there are more than 50 countries ranked higher than Argentina.
And I think that one of the lessons that we can learn from that is that democracy itself is not a guarantee either for prosperity or for freedom. And we have to remember that the disaster of Venezuela has occurred beginning under democracy. Venezuela for many years was a democracy that started to reduce its levels of economic freedom. This did not start just with Hugo Chavez. Hugo Chavez accelerated that in a populist way, but it had been decreasing its economic freedom. And when you decrease your economic freedom, you decrease other freedoms because, as somebody once said, the control of economics is the control of life itself. That's why when you have more economic freedom, you have more civil liberties, you have more political liberties. When you reduce those, you have less. We're seeing that in Argentina as well, as it reduced its economic freedoms beginning in about 15 or so years ago. We've seen all sorts of violations of personal freedoms, and there's been real violations of political freedoms along the way. And so that's the situation that Argentina finds itself in now. Both countries are heading into negative economic growth.
But countries can experience the same success Chile has seen in the last 30 years. These free economic principles aren't specific to one place or culture. For those who love nature, there is no better place to vacation than Chile. It has about the most varied climate and topography on the earth. In the north, it has the world's driest desert. In the south, it has places with rainfall close to world records. From north to south, Chile is almost 3,000 miles long, longer than that from New York to Los Angeles. Yet it averages a scant 110 miles wide. It has 4,000 miles of picturesque coastline along the Pacific Ocean, much of it within sight of some of the tallest mountains on Earth, as high as 23,000 feet. All in a matter of hours, you can go from a Pacific beach villa to alpine skiing. Because Chile is a developed country, the infrastructure is good, with high-speed highways and good air service throughout the country. And the health standards are really high. Chile also has first world health standards and facilities, and the lowest crime rate in Latin America, with a much lower murder rate than the United States. Whether one is looking for a 5-star resort or an outback camping or rafting experience, it can all be found easily in Chile. In Chile, there is a climate and landscape to suit most everyone, from those who love beaches or deserts or forests or mountains, an improbable success given by nature. The name Chile itself is most commonly accepted to be derived from the native Aymara word Chile, meaning the land where the earth ends. But there's no end to the hope and warmth that I've found in this country.
I think that Chile was really far away from where from, I don't know, 35 years ago. It's totally a different country. We had the chance to see another world, much more flexible, with free trade. We have like a stable economy. We had all the settings ready to use. And we had a lot of people to want to work with flexible rules and flexible laws that allows us to I don't know, to just wake up the morning after a dream and try to do whatever you want.
Well, I think that that's the base of my life. In that kind of freedom, the true believed that prosperity could only come from freedom.
The essentials of the reforms done in the 70s have been kept already for 30 years. So the stability of Chile depends a lot on the fact that different sectors of society have come to support the essence of a free market economic system. And I hope that in the future this will remain so.
Despite its unusual geography and troubled past, this country is full of vibrant, inspiring, and warm people and has declared itself as improbably successful.